Sergeant Connor Vance stood in the dim light of the command center, his eyes fixed on the holoprojected images of Ganymede 5. The map flickered as the camera zoomed in on the colony's perimeter, now nothing more than a smoking ruin. Alien forces, a terrifying coalition of galactic elites, had launched a brutal assault, tearing apart what had once been a thriving human settlement. Now, nothing remained but the stench of death and the distant, desperate flicker of human resistance. Vance didn't flinch. He wasn't the kind of man who let his emotions show. In the shadow of this catastrophe, he was the quiet center, the calm in the storm. He had been called on before, but this was different. Ganymede 5 wasn't just any colony. It was Earth's last foothold on the frontier. If it fell, humanity would be pushed back to Earth's own doorstep, humiliated and broken. The galactic elites knew that. Earth knew that. And that was why they had sent him. A low hum filled the room as Colonel Harris, Earth's military commander, appeared beside him, a hologram of urgency. His voice was grim but controlled. "Vance, this is it. We can't spare more than you. Ganymede's falling, and no reinforcements are coming." Vance didn't turn. He simply nodded. "What's left?" he asked, his voice steady as steel. "Some survivors," Harris said. "A few hundred left. They're hunkered down at the last defense station. The elites are about to launch their final strike." Vance glanced over at the projected map. It was clear. Time was running out. "How long until they hit?" 2 hours, Harris replied. "We need you to get in there and hold them off until we can gather a counter-offensive." Vance didn't need to hear the rest. The order was simple: win or die trying. But that was his mission. He was Earth's ace, the one soldier they could count on when all hope was lost. He looked at Harris, his gaze cold. "I'll get it done. Just get me there." The transmission cut off, and Vance turned toward the waiting shuttle. He didn't need any more briefing. His reputation already spoke for him. 900 confirmed kills, each one a testament to his methodical, brutal efficiency. A soldier who didn't hesitate, who didn't ask questions, who only did one thing: survive and make the enemy wish they had never crossed paths with him. As he boarded the shuttle, he let his mind wander, if only for a moment. He thought of Earth. It seemed so far away now, distant behind layers of bureaucracy and political games. The Earth he had known was a place of peace, before the galaxy had come to view humanity as a threat. Now they were nothing more than a nuisance to the galactic elites, mankind's expansion a blip in their grand designs. But Earth wasn't just a home for the weak. It was the crucible that had forged the strongest warriors in the galaxy. He had spent his entire life in the crucible, and he had no intention of letting it melt away. The shuttle's engines rumbled as it shot out of Earth's atmosphere, the world below shrinking into a distant orb. Vance didn't look back. The journey to Ganymede 5 was short, but the atmosphere on the shuttle was anything but calm. The pilot, a nervous young lieutenant named Davis, kept glancing at Vance as if he expected the seasoned sergeant to speak, to give some reassurance. But Vance didn't waste his breath. There were no comforting words, no pep talks. The only thing that mattered was the mission. As the shuttle broke through Ganymede's thick atmosphere, Vance finally spoke. "What's the situation on the ground?" Davis swallowed hard. "It's bad, sir. The last outpost's been hit hard. The elites are closing in, and there's barely anything left of our defenses. Civilians, they're all but gone. Most of the military's either dead or too injured to fight." Vance nodded. He had expected as much. "How many survivors?" Davis hesitated. "A couple hundred maybe. The rest are scattered in small groups. Some of them are hiding in the mines. I don't know how much longer they can hold out." "We'll make them hold," Vance muttered, voice steely. "Where's the last defensive line?" "Sector 23. The old mining facility." Davis's voice wavered as he glanced back at the hulking figure of Vance, the soldier who seemed too calm, too detached for such a grim situation. As the shuttle descended toward the surface, the colony's crumbled buildings came into view, streets choked with smoke, shattered walls that had once been strongholds, now standing as tombstones. And then, the unmistakable signs of the alien invasion. Sleek, dark ships cutting through the skies, dropping troops in well-coordinated waves. The shuttle jolted as it landed near the last defense station, the landing ramp clattering down. Vance wasted no time. He didn't pause to take in the view of the broken world around him. The mission was in front of him. He strapped on his gear, combat rifle, grenades, his signature sniper rifle, and set out toward the perimeter of the defensive line. The survivors were holed up in a makeshift bunker made of scrap metal and the skeletons of collapsed buildings. Vance was met by Lieutenant Davis, who was waiting anxiously at the entrance. "We've got a few men on watch, but we're barely holding the perimeter," Davis said, looking worried. "The elites are getting organized. They know we're running out of time." "Not for long," Vance muttered as he walked past him, heading into the dark interior of the bunker. Inside, a dozen soldiers were gathered, most of them bloodied, some barely conscious. The few who could stand greeted Vance with nods of grim recognition. This wasn't a place for speeches. It wasn't a place for hope. It was a place for survival. Vance didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We're not going to wait to die," he said, voice like ice. "We're going to give them a reason to regret ever stepping foot on this rock." Davis looked unsure, his voice cracking with desperation. "Sir, we're outnumbered. They'll swarm us." Vance looked him in the eyes, steady as ever. "I don't need numbers. I just need you to follow my lead." As the soldiers moved into position, Vance surveyed the battlefield, his mind already working on the next step. He could feel the tension in the air. This would be the fight of their lives. And he would be the one to carry it. The first enemy wave hit minutes later, crashing against the perimeter. Vance didn't flinch. He aimed his sniper rifle, took out the first wave with surgical precision, then moved into the fray. The battle had begun. And Sergeant Vance was ready. The first wave hit with the fury of a thunderstorm, alien troops dropping from the sky in precise formations, their black armor gleaming in the dim light of Ganymede V's dying sun. Vance's rifle was already in his hands, the cold metal feeling like an extension of himself. He didn't hesitate, his fingers pulling the trigger before his mind could even register the orders given. The first alien drop. A blur of motion, then silence. Vance adjusted his aim, focusing on the next figure in his scope. A sharp breath, and another alien fell. "Stay low," Vance shouted as the soldiers around him scrambled into position, taking cover behind crumbled walls and overturned debris. The battlefield was a maze of destruction, and it was about to get worse. The bunker that had once been a haven for Ganymede's defenders was now ground zero. Alien ships hovered overhead, sending down laser beams that cut through the remnants of human barricades. The forces of the Galactic elites had proven themselves far more organized and ruthless than anything Vance had encountered before. Their precision was terrifying, but Vance wasn't impressed. He had faced worse. It was the humans who would turn the tide. Vance's sniper rifle cracked again, and another elite soldier dropped like a ragdoll. He pulled back, moving from cover to cover. His eyes were sharp, scanning for the next target. The sound of laser fire echoed in the air, followed by the dull thud of explosions as their artillery made impact. "Clear left side," shouted Lieutenant Davis, his voice cutting through the chaos. Vance nodded without looking. "Keep them moving. We're not holding back." He wasn't giving an inch. The first line of defense, an old concrete wall reinforced with scrap metal, was already being overrun. The alien forces, clad in sleek, intimidating black armor, surged forward like a swarm. Their weapons were silent but deadly, and they moved with unnerving precision. But Vance had seen it all before. He had fought the galaxy's finest, and he knew how to strike back. As the aliens advanced, Vance ordered a full retreat to a secondary defensive position deeper in the colony. The survivors were disorganized, but they followed him without question. Their trust in him was all they had left. The soldiers fell back under fire, but Vance was already thinking ahead. He dropped a few more elites from his position, watching their bodies crumple, but he had to keep moving. He moved like a ghost through the rubble, his movements calculated, efficient. There was no room for error. Move, move, move. Vance barked, rallying the troops as they pulled back to the next fortified position, a small building that had been reinforced for such an emergency. The structure was still intact, though the roof was partially caved in from the constant bombardment. It would be their last stand if they didn't make it count. "Sir, we're losing too many," Davis said, his face pale with fear, though he tried to hide it. "How long can we keep this up?" Vance turned to him, his face expressionless. "As long as it takes. We're not dying today." The sound of distant engines roared overhead, followed by the unmistakable hum of alien infantry carriers descending from the sky. A new wave was coming. This time, it wasn't just infantry. There were heavy mechs, massive war machines that could turn a battleground into a charred wasteland. Vance could already hear their hydraulics groaning as they touched down. "We've got incoming mechs," shouted one of the soldiers, his voice trembling. Vance scanned the horizon. The mechs were already coming into view, their thick, metallic legs crushing the earth beneath them with every step. They were towering, mechanical giants, each armed with cannons capable of leveling entire buildings with a single shot. Vance didn't flinch. "Get to cover!" he shouted, his voice cold and commanding. He motioned to his squad to flank the incoming threat. The soldiers scrambled, their boots crunching on the dirt. Vance took his position atop a pile of rubble, setting up his rifle. His breath steadied as he lined up his target. He had a clear shot. One of the mechs had a weak point, a small exposed panel on its underside. Vance knew if he hit it, he could disable the whole machine. "Steady," he whispered to himself. "Steady." His finger tightened around the trigger. His body felt like it was made of stone, every muscle coiled and ready. The shot rang out, a sharp crack that split the air. The mech shuddered as the bullet struck its weak point, a burst of sparks flying from the damaged panel. The machine staggered, its systems faltering. Vance didn't wait to see if it went down. He was already shifting his focus to the next target. "Nice shot, Sergeant," Davis shouted from below, a touch of awe in his voice. "Don't get distracted," Vance replied, his tone as flat as ever. "They're coming with everything." And they were. The alien forces advanced like a relentless tide, mechs, infantry, and drones closing in. But with each wave, Vance's soldiers were learning. They were adapting to the enemy's tactics, using their knowledge of the terrain to fight back. The battle raged on for hours, the colony slowly turning into a war zone. Explosions rocked the ground. The air was thick with smoke, the sky painted with streaks of laser fire. The survivors were fewer now, but they were still fighting. Vance could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else, determination. A group of elites had managed to breach the secondary line, forcing the survivors to retreat deeper into the colony. Vance grabbed Davis by the shoulder as the young officer moved past him. "Hold the line," Vance ordered. "I'll take care of this." Davis hesitated, looking at him with confusion. "Sir, you can't go alone. It's too dangerous." Vance didn't respond. He had already started moving, pushing past Davis without a second thought. He was the only one who could do this. The rest of them were good, but they weren't Vance. He reached the heart of the battle, the streets of the colony now a maze of destroyed vehicles, abandoned buildings, and bodies. The elites were everywhere, pushing forward, but Vance moved in the shadows. He struck with precision, one shot, one kill. The battlefield became his canvas, and the elites were nothing more than pieces in a game he controlled. But even as Vance tore through their ranks, the tide was turning. The aliens were relentless, and Vance was starting to feel the pressure. The adrenaline was wearing off, and his body was beginning to show signs of exhaustion. A sharp crack echoed nearby, and Vance ducked instinctively as a laser beam whizzed past his head. The enemy was getting closer, and the odds were beginning to stack against him. "Vance!" Davis's voice crackled over the comms. "We need you back here. They're coming in too fast." Vance didn't answer. Instead, he took a final breath, setting his sights on the advancing enemy. The next few minutes would decide everything. He had one chance. He would either stop them here or the colony would fall. And Vance was not about to let that happen. Ask ChatGPT. The colony was on the brink. Smoke billowed from every corner of Ganymede 5 as Vance sprinted through the chaos, his boots pounding against the cracked asphalt. The ground trembled under the weight of the alien mechs, their massive feet leaving deep craters in the earth. They were everywhere now, swarming in tight formations, their weapons poised for the final assault. Vance didn't have time to count them. He didn't need to. He reached the edge of the central plaza, where the last line of defense had fallen. The remains of human soldiers lay scattered across the street, their bodies broken, their weapons abandoned. The survivors were retreating into the mines, the last refuge they had left. But Vance knew the elites wouldn't stop until every last human was eradicated. He had to finish this. The sound of laser fire rang out, snapping him back to the present. He ducked behind a crumbling building as a barrage of red beams streaked through the air. Vance's heart beat in a steady rhythm, calm, controlled. The battlefield was a blur of noise, but in his mind everything was quiet, precise. He had trained for this. He had seen it all before. "Sergeant, we're losing ground." Lieutenant Davis's voice crackled over the comms. There was a sense of urgency in his tone. The boy was scared. Vance didn't blame him. "Hold your position, Lieutenant," Vance ordered, his voice hard. "I'm going after the command ship." "You can't go alone, sir," Davis protested. "They'll rip you apart out there." Vance didn't answer. His mind was already focused on the target ahead, the massive black warship hovering ominously above the colony. It loomed like a dark specter in the sky, casting a long shadow over the destruction below. Commander Zyther, leader of the Galactic elites, was on that ship. And Vance was going to make sure the bastard paid for every life lost today. The thought of Zyther, a cold and arrogant alien commander, made Vance's blood run hot. He remembered the images of his mentor's death, the way Zyther had tortured Captain Marshall before killing him. Vance hadn't forgotten. He wouldn't forget. Today it was personal. Without a word, Vance pressed forward, using the wreckage of a collapsed building for cover. He had only one objective now, to get to Zyther's ship and destroy the enemy leadership. With their command structure broken, the elites would scatter, and humanity might just have a fighting chance. As he advanced, Vance's mind shifted into the familiar rhythm of battle. His rifle was slung across his back, his sidearm already drawn. The streets were empty, save for the occasional alien patrol moving past. The battle had shifted in their favor, just as planned. Vance had always been good at leading the enemy into trap. The city might have fallen, but the fight wasn't over. He moved quickly and quietly, ducking under the shadows and taking down straggling alien forces one by one. His sniper rifle was a whisper in the chaos, each shot finding its mark. No time to linger. No time to savor victories. Then, he saw it, a transport ship, sleek and fast, touching down near the main gate to the command ship. A group of elite soldiers disembarked, heavily armed and ready for battle. Vance had no intention of letting them get any closer. He slid into position behind a shattered wall, setting up his rifle. His scope came into focus. 5 soldiers. The first was wearing heavier armor, carrying a massive energy cannon on his back. The others were armed with plasma rifles. Vance's breath slowed as he analyzed their positions. One shot. Vance's finger pulled the trigger. The first soldier crumpled, his head exploding in a spray of blood and armor fragments. The others scattered, but Vance was already on the move. He dropped down into the street, moving faster than they could react. His next shot took out another elite, this time hitting a soldier in the chest. The plasma rifle slipped from his grip as he collapsed. The remaining 3 fired back, but Vance was already behind cover, sprinting toward them. The remaining elites hesitated for a split second, enough for Vance to close the gap. He threw a grenade, the blast deafening as it wiped out the last of the aliens. Their bodies flew apart, their weapons disintegrating under the force of the explosion. Vance's breath came in steady puff. The transport was clear. He moved quickly, slipping into the small craft and taking the pilot by surprise. The elite's eyes widened as Vance yanked him from the seat and tossed him aside. Vance didn't need to speak. He was already pulling the controls to bring the ship into the air. The sky above the colony was a hellscape, dark and thick with smoke. The warship loomed larger, and Vance could see the figures on the command bridge, moving in and out of view. Zyther was on that ship, and soon he'd be facing the Reaper. The ship raced toward the command warship, and the air around it buzzed with static as laser fire began to light up the sky. Vance didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto the warship's weak point, the lower port side, where a defense gap had formed in the chaos. He punched in the coordinate. "Sergeant, you're crazy," Davis said, panic in his voice. Vance didn't respond. He was already on target, the ship locked in its descent toward the weak point. The control panel beeped in protest as Vance shoved the throttle forward. The ship surged, plunging toward the warship's underside. He reached for the ship's weapons systems and launched a barrage of missiles, sending them flying toward the massive structure. The explosions were deafening, tearing through the side of the warship. It staggered, a visible jolt running through the entire ship as it rocked from the blast. A crackle of static on the comms. Zyther's voice came through, cold, mocking. "You think you can kill me, human?" Vance grinned. "I'm counting on it." Inside the warship, Zyther snarled as alarms blared. His soldiers scrambled to repair the damage, but the human soldier had already made his move. The ship was listing, half its systems offline. "Get him!" Zyther ordered, but it was too late. Vance was already in the heart of the ship. Vance stepped onto the bridge, his combat boots echoing on the metallic floor. He aimed his sidearm directly at Zyther, who was standing tall, as if expecting the encounter. "You," Zyther sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're nothing. Your people are nothing." Vance narrowed his eyes. "And yet, here I am." Zyther lunged, but Vance was faster. In one smooth motion, he drew his rifle, aiming directly at Zyther's chest. The shot was clean, the alien commander falling to the floor, his blood pooling on the cold metal. Vance stood over him, the fight won, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. With Zyther dead, the command ship was in disarray. Humanity had survived another day, and Vance would see to it that they would survive many more. The darkness of space stretched before him as he took one last look at the burning wreckage of the warship. There was no time for rest. The war was far from over, and Vance would be there, always fighting, always watching. Because that's what he was born to do. The Reaper was far from done.